Investing in the TSP in the best way possible can make a huge difference in your quality of life. For example, if you invest $1,000 a month for 30 years, compare that at a 6% rate of return to 10% rate of return, the difference is $1.2 million. So watch this video to the end to make sure you're not missing out on $1.2 million. I'm Tim Wolf, and if you're looking for ways to be smarter with your money, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Let's start off with what is the TSP. The Thrift Savings Plan is for all federal government employees, and this includes the military. It's the federal government's version of the 401k. And most people that have the TSP have an option to get a match, which means you contribute at least 5% of your salary to the TSP, and the government will contribute another 5% on top of that. And you can either choose to do a Roth TSP or a traditional TSP or both. Roth means you're gonna pay taxes now and pay no taxes later. Traditional means you're not gonna pay any taxes now and you're gonna pay the taxes later during retirement. If you're not sure on the difference between Roth or traditional, I have a video about it and I'll link it in the description below. But generally speaking, if you start investing younger and earlier, a Roth TSP is going to be a better option for you. However, keep in mind, anything the government matches, so their 5% has to go into the traditional TSP, whether you put your 5% into the Roth or traditional. And go ahead, if you like this video at all, please hit the like button. And in order to avoid any unnecessary penalties or tax, you cannot withdraw the money in your TSP until age 59 and a half. So when it comes to investing within the TSP, you can choose between lifecycle funds or individual funds. And the lifecycle funds, like the L2060, L2050, are made up of the individual funds. And there's 5 different individual funds: the G fund, the F fund, the C fund, the S fund, and the I fund. The G fund is the government securities investment fund. This is designed to be a very, very low risk investment and produces a rate of return just above inflation. The F fund is the fixed income investment fund, and this is meant to mirror the US aggregate bond market, which is again going to be a very low risk, low return investment fund. The C fund is the common stock index investment fund. This is meant to mirror the S&P 500, which is essentially the benchmark for the American stock market. The S fund, which is the small cap stock index fund, and this is meant to mirror the Dow Jones US completion total stock market index. And lastly, the I fund, the International Stock Index Investment Fund, and this is meant to mirror the MSCI fund, which is a popular international stock index fund. The life cycle funds are named by certain years, like the L2060 fund, the L2030 fund. The number in that is a year that they anticipate you'll retire or start to withdraw that money from the TSP. So if you're invested in the L2050 fund, they're anticipating that you'll turn age 59 and a half around year 2050 and start using that money. And within the life cycle funds, it's a mixture of the different individual funds we just talked about, the G, F, C, S, and I one. The difference in the life cycle is they allocate differently how much they're going to invest in the G, how much they're going to invest in the F, how much they're going to invest in the I, depending on how close you're getting to the date you're going to retire. The closer you get to that year 2050 or 2060, the more conservative they're going to make those individual investments. For example, the L2025 fund, which is for people that are about to start withdrawing this money here shortly in around 2025, is invested mostly in the G fund because this is a very low risk, conservative, low rate of return investment. And now compare that to the L2065 fund, where these are people that are just starting out their careers, and a lot of it is invested in the C fund and almost none of it in the G fund. What I would say about life cycle funds is they're very mediocre. They're not the worst, they're not the best. I personally never invested in them when I had the TSP in the military, and you can get a much better rate of return investing yourself in certain individual funds within the TSP. A good rule of thumb when you're investing in the TSP is to compare your investments to the S&P 500, which is the benchmark of the stock market. Historically, it has done just over 10% a year since its inception. In the last 10 years, it's done just over 11% every year on average. It's always good to look back at least 10 years so you have a good chart of how the stock is trending. Looking back only a couple of years may not be representative of the entire history of the fund. So if we look right on the TSP's website, the L2030 fund over the last 10 years has averaged 8.47%. The L2040 fund has averaged 9.41%, and the L2050 fund has not been around for 10 years yet, but if we look at the 5-year rate of return, on average has done 8.49%. So again, you can see they're kind of mediocre. They're not above that 10% mark that we're looking for. And you may not think the difference between 9% and 10% is a lot, but it is. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of your life. And now we look at the same TSP website and look at the individual funds. So the G fund, the last 10 years has done 2.23% on average, and the F fund has done 3.99%. These are the most conservative, lowest rate of return funds the TSP has. And the C fund has done 13.59%, which is the best performing fund in the TSP on average. And the S fund has done 13.08% on average every year for the last 10 years. The I fund has done 5.85%. And the C and the S are performing really well above that 10% S&P 500 benchmark. So when we're talking about what investments you're going to pick within the TSP, after you've chosen whether to do Roth or traditional or both, I'd recommend doing at least 60% in the C fund. This is going to be the S&P 500 equivalent fund, the best performing fund within the TSP, well over 13% every single year on your money. And the rest of it into the S fund because that's done really well too, just over 13%. Or you can even do 80% into the C fund and 20% into the S fund. That's what I did when I was in your shoes. That's what I recommend you do now, especially if you're just starting out in your career or you're halfway through or you have a couple more years till retirement and you're not going to need the money anytime soon. Invest it as aggressively as you can. The TSP as a whole is really not aggressive at all. It's a very safe investment. Even the C fund and the S fund are very diverse investments. It's not like you're investing in a single stock when you only invest in the C fund. You're still invested in a diverse amount of stocks. So it's very safe and it gives you a much better rate of return than the lifecycle funds. For example, say you only make 6% on your money for 30 years and you're investing $1,000 a month. At the end of 30 years, you're gonna have $1 million. Cool, that's not bad. But what if you had invested in the C and the S fund and have gotten 13% rate of return after investing the same amount of money per month for the same amount 30 years, you would retire with $4.3 million. Would you rather have $1 million or $4.3 million? So it does make a huge difference picking the right funds within your TSP. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to subscribe and please hit the like button to help this video out, or share this video with anyone that you're in the military with or you're working in the federal government for that might need to hear this or doesn't know a lot about the TSP. I'll see you guys for next week's video.